I've been seeing an insane amount of news about this. Or like, maybe I should say, I've been seeing the far right being very loud about this specific piece of information. So we all remember the wonderful, wacky land of contrasts known as Argentina, right? Remember Peronism, rapid descent into fascism for like the third time in the country's history. Yeah, right. We all remember mass protests. Well, Javier Milei has shown us all up. I'm really sorry to say, guys, we're going to have to take the L on this one, because after only having been in power for a few months, for the first time in a long time, Argentina has a monthly budget surplus.
Ministerio de Turismo y Deporte, afuera. Ministerio de Cultura, afuera. Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres, Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas, afuera.
Oh, we're not going to do voice coverage of this. We're just going to use text. Why do they do that? Why do they got to do that? This video, afuera. So wait, is there any vocal coverage of it?
Argentina, under its libertarian president Javier Milei, achieved a budget surplus in January, the first full month of his presidency. Argentina recorded a budget surplus of over $620 million in January. This was Argentina's first budget surplus since 2012. The budget took into account the country's latest interest payment on public debt. The surplus follows Milei's focus on cutting expenses and debt burden in a bid to dollarize the economy. Meanwhile, poverty levels in the South American country hit 57.4% in January.
I appreciate this channel not padding those two pieces of information, like really like sandwiching those directly together. The budget surplus and 60% of the population being in poverty. That's good.
The highest in at least 20 years. The devaluation of the peso was a key reason for the rise in poverty rate. The currency was devalued shortly after Milei's inauguration in early December. The devaluation led to a rise of food prices, leading to an increase in poverty. Reacting to the rise in poverty levels, Milei pinned the blame on the previous Peronist regime's policies. He said, and I'm going to quote him here, "The true inheritance of the caste model. 6 out of every 10 Argentines are poor." Milei took office in December, promising to dollarize the economy, tame an annual inflation rate of over 200%, eliminate the fiscal deficit, and end benefits for Argentina's political dynasties, which he called the caste. In December, his government rolled out...
This video isn't very informative. Okay. So, what is libertarianism? Libertarianism is a made-up ideology. It is an internally contradictory ideology where you simultaneously prioritize the abstract concept of freedom and the very real, like, policy-driven aspect of letting businesses do literally whatever the they want. And the problem with that is that when you give businesses whatever, the power to do whatever they want, invariably your freedom is restricted. Evidence to this point can be found in all of human history. As it turns out, businesses are essentially just little governments with power over you. If you work there, if you need their pay in order to pay your rent or get your food or whatever else, your medicine, they have a lot of power over you, and they can weaponize that power. When they work together, they can effectively control the government and sway it into making decisions that benefit it at your expense. So as I say, libertarianism claims to be a pro-freedom ideology. In practice, it very, very, very rarely is. One of the reasons it's very important to understand this is because it allows us to understand a curious phenomena where libertarians and fascists get along really, 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 really well. Like, all the time. Basically, every libertarian is one unanswered hypothetical away from explaining how massive state crackdown on dissidents and protesters using the police, military, or privatized police forces is necessary. Like, immediately. Like, that gets leapt to very quickly, very robustly. This happens all the time. And it's one of the reasons why fascists like libertarian economic arguments, because what fascists will often do is, many fascists understand that openly proclaiming that they want like a removal of rights is bad optics. So instead what they'll do is say, we don't want a removal of rights, we're in favor of rights. We're in favor of the right to treat people how we want to treat them. And If they don't like that, they can go elsewhere. The problem is, of course, that this is functionally, as we talked about earlier, a revocation of Civil Rights Act logic. A business owner's freedom to not provide service to a black man is not really a decision that enhances the freedom in society, right? Like, people will sometimes say, oh, well, market forces will mean businesses will be good to black people because that means they get more business. Then why didn't that happen during the Jim Crow period? It's almost as though there were other social biases that made it in the interests of the racist business owners to not provide services to black people. This is just a roundabout way of reestablishing apartheid. So the reason I talk about all of this here, okay, is because since libertarian economic policies are a good way for fascists or reactionaries to quietly front their discriminatory policies, there are a bunch of people all around the world who are looking at Javier Milei as a source of inspiration. There's a Sky News Australia video right here. I will look at that next. Why not? I looked up articles on this phenomena. You know what I found? Here's an article praising his budget surplus from Emerging Real Estate Digest. I want you to picture in your mind what kind of person might read Emerging Real Estate Digest, whatever you prefer. I saw some of it on US News. I've seen some of it being covered. Oh, here we go. The FEE, that's something. I saw it being covered on Fox News. I pretty much only see right-wing, or at least there's a bias there covering this information. And a lot of that is because, like, the information itself isn't very impressive, so only the right wing is going to consider it noteworthy because they can use it as an example of the successes of this particular set of economic policies, right? It's not difficult to achieve a budget surplus if you enter the government and then just cut spending everywhere. The problem is that cutting spending everywhere leads to negative consequences. Like, what's the point of maintaining a budget surplus if you've made everyone's lives worse? Like, that's like, yeah, like, obviously, right? Like, that's like going into a house that's spending too much on its power and water and then going like, I have a solution, and cut power and water. There, now we're not like spending too much in it. Like, okay, that's great. You need a shower though.
Now let's talk about the...
Look at this video up here. Milei takes charge. Argentina's president fights socialism with free market reforms. It's not exactly subtle the kind of person who's promoting Milei. Media bias, subtle. Jobs versus machines, the rise of artificial intelligence. I don't know. Flooded in debt. Rand Paul's fight to fix federal flood insurance. The full Rand Paul on COVID, the lab leak, and Anthony Fauci. Whatever. It's a type of guy.
Man they call the Argentinian Trump, President Javier Milei has been in the job.
Is this too rambly? Is the point that I'm making trying to come across? A lot of people have their eyes on Milei because they want some kind of positive example they can point to support their plan of tearing apart their own country's social structures and implementing pro-business policies in a way that also makes it possible to legally discriminate against people. Like, this is like a two-front approach. It is reactionary and it is pro-business. That Venn diagram often overlaps. So they're looking for anything here that they can celebrate, but a single monthly budget surplus is extremely unimpressive if you got there by cutting a bunch of social policies.
A couple of months, but he's taking some bold action to fix what has gone from, well, Argentina's gone from being one of the wealthiest nations to an absolute economic basket case with inflation running at 250%. And now, incredibly, Ralph, there are reports that he has just overseen the nation's first monthly budget surplus in over a decade. And I think I've got an idea how he did it. Do you remember?
Is it only a short-term success but not future-proof? It's like keeping a monthly budget and realizing you're in the red. So you think, oh, I can cut spending, no problem. And then you don't buy groceries for a month. And then in your apartment, you're looking over that month's budget. And it's like, I saved like $300. Awesome. While your stomach grumbles loudly. You know, it's we're looking for long-term consequences here.
Remember this?
Ministerio de Cultura, afuera.
I do. It's the one clip that keeps getting shown over and over again. Isn't it interesting that when foreign media decides to positively depict Milei, the way they do this is by showing him like a lunatic discarding social programs. Like, isn't that interesting that of all the wacky things he's done and said, this is the... By the way, he's already walked this back. Since being elected president, he's already said he can't cut all these programs. This is already, by his admission, a lie. This isn't what he's doing. But they love seeing a far-right strongman take charge and then cut social programs, because they don't want social programs, because they want to enforce at the very least austerity, and at the most like outright apartheid against certain groups of people. You can guess which ones those are.
Afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad. Afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas. Afuera. Aunque te resistas. Ministerio de Ciencia y Tecnología e Innovación. Afuera. Ministerio de Trabajo, Empleo y Seguridad Social. Afuera.
Ralph, how do you judge Javier Milei's performance thus far? I know it's very early days.
No, but you have to kind of admit there's a certain delicious irony that about 40 years after the Argentinians lost the Falkland Wars against Margaret Thatcher's Britain, they basically got now their own Margaret Thatcher. I mean, they do share a certain hairstyle together, so that's probably the
Thank you for this incredibly substantive analysis. I guess it's a 6-minute video, so they have time to expand on it. Let's hear this guy. Apparently he's a Webster University assistant professor. What the fuck is Webster University? Is that sounds fake. I mean, maybe it's not. I don't know. Australia is pretty fake. A private university with its main campus in Missouri? It's Sky News. And he's coming in from Vienna. So, guess this guy goes all over the place? Webster University, Austria? Is that? Webster Vienna Private University. A private American university in Vienna, Austria. While affiliated to the Webster University in St. Louis, USA, it remains a distinct and separate... It's a private American university in Vienna. 500 students from 70 countries. There's not much information on the Wikipedia page. Just odd, I guess. But, all right. Seems real.
One of the many things that they share in common. No, I think he means it. I mean, this was always, we have one big disappointment in Europe.
Wrong uni. He got his PhD in political science from the University of Kentucky. Well, we're talking about the school that he's teaching at, not the school that he got his degree at.
I believe that's Giorgia Meloni, where the expectations were high, and then we have Javier Milei in Argentina, and he seems to mean it. And he combines something that I find particularly intriguing. He goes directly to the people. That is a very shrewd strategy. And we see even the demonstrations against him, like by public unions, like there are demonstrations, but they are very careful. So his approval ratings, his popularity with the people is still very high. If he can keep that up, right?
But they're careful? What? What does that mean?
He can continue to communicate to the people that these reforms are going to be hard, but ultimately they're going to pay off. He might really be successful. So if he combines the revolutionary and the reformer, kind of the revolutionary that got into power that now transforms into the reformer, I mean, that would be great. A strong Argentina, an Argentina that so openly said they want to be on the side of the West, they want to be pro-Western, they want to be with us versus China, versus Russia. I think that would be a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I really hope that he can keep it up and that he will be successful in the end.
What policies? What do you have a degree?
The first signs seem to indicate that he will be. Inflation is still a problem, but these things take some time. I mean, this is going to be a painful medicine that he has to administer, but I hope that ultimately it's going to pay off.
Well, can he cure Argentina from the decades of destructive socialism?
Yes, there we go. Busting out my handy-dandy Argentina inflation tracker. The bottom of this chart, by the way, is 100%. The last tracked amount higher than it's like been in January 2024.
Libertarianism, if you prefer. And will that be perhaps a trend that could sweep through South America? Because you look at other countries there which were previously wealthy, they sit on massive amounts of oil, they should be wealthy, and yet their citizens are living in poverty.
Yeah, Latin America, unfortunately, tends to kind of swing back.
I wonder, man, it really makes you wonder if anything happened in Latin America that might have disrupted the growth and development of the continent. It really makes you. I'm putting my big noodle right to that problem.
and forth between extremes. Look at Brazil, right? You have a Bolsonaro, and then you have Luis Ignacio da Silva. You had similar developments in Chile. Now you have Argentina. It's one of the very interesting characteristics of Latin America, that they don't really have the kind of political continuity. So that's the thing.
Man, it's almost like there are two opposing forces in Latin America, a local indigenous working class interest in equality and workers' rights, and some kind of like multinational, like racialized business class that imposes itself on Latin America for the interests both of the wealthy in those countries and outside of those countries.
Is this going to be a fad? Like Bolsonaro in Brazil? Is Milei going to have one term and then they're going to vote him out of office? Or can he make the case convincingly that it's either this new path of reform or its decline and potentially a Venezuelan scenario? As I said, the voters in Latin America are tricky. They change their minds very quickly, very often. But maybe he can do something differently than those who came before him.
And I'd like to just quickly talk about the US, where former President...
This guy actually hasn't said anything that comes across as like super duper partisan to me, by the way. Just to be clear, like I don't think he said anything that I would like immediately consider. He's being pretty light-handed, I think. It almost seems to me like she wants him to do a big spiel on how like Milei has defeated socialism forever. You know?
President Donald Trump has been ordered to pay $355 million in a frankly absurd fraud case in New York, a clear political hit job.
Well, it really speaks confidence on your part to the input your guest will offer, that you have to poison the well by preloading the opinion that's acceptable on this network, you know?
It's going to be appealed. But in the meanwhile, we've got a group of truckers now threatening to boycott New York, refusing to deliver in that city, which would have a huge impact if this protest gets off the ground. Let's hear from one of these truckers.
What? Is this one truck? What are you talking about? Refuse to deliver to New York City? New York City has more GDP than most countries. What? If you don't deliver to New York City, you'll just lose your job. Like, you're not... Truckers aren't like you're not like wandering cowboys. The cargo is put on your truck and then you are told to bring it to a place.
You in New York, you better get up out of there.
I can't. It's not, and then the music is copyright. They already backed off already.
Ralph, we're seeing truckers and farmers becoming a political force, a powerful political force.
The trucker put a TikTok out saying, so it literally is just one trucker. Is Sky News this much worse than Fox News? This feels worse. Genuinely, it's really bad.
Yeah, and once again, those in power and the media don't get it. Right? They don't understand that the more you try to prevent, whether it's right-wing parties in Europe or Donald Trump in the United States, the more you try to prevent them from participating in elections.
Okay, now we're getting to the crazy partisan shit.
The more popular they get, because they see it, and I think they're right in that assessment. They don't see this as an attack on Donald Trump. They see it as an attack on them. They feel that there is this guy, as funny and idiosyncratic as he is, but he speaks for us. So if they try to gag him, basically they try to gag us. And this is exactly what we see in Germany. This is exactly what we see in other parts of the West as well, where they say it's not about the politicians. It's about the sense that those for whom they speak, for those for whom they stand, that if you try to silence them, you create the impression that you try to silence the people, and that impression is correct.
Okay, this guy doesn't say shit. This guy's boring as hell. I take it all back. I'm not even complimenting his suit jacket. Stupid. This whole thing is stupid. Under most circumstances, I wouldn't be this straightforward about this, but I want to be clear. As I understand it, the policies that Milei is putting forward are objectively harmful. I hope nothing happens in Argentina that gives them the illusion of functioning, you know? Like, so if it turns out that Milei's policies somehow uplift the average Argentinian, this would be extraordinary to me. But if that is the case, I hope it is recognized as such, because I like good things and I don't like bad things. Again, the only philosophy, the only position in normative ethics that is yet to be defeated. Good things are good, bad things are bad, right? Now, I don't think that's very likely, of course. I think that based on my understanding of what's happening, what Milei is doing is essentially just tearing the country apart to better serve the interests of the business class. Hardly the first time this has happened in Argentina or elsewhere. And I hope that his harmful policies are recognized as being harmful and that he's not able to procure some kind of smokescreen where he's like, look, the inflation went down. And meanwhile, like 98% of the population lives in poverty. Argentine austerity anger mounts, but government says it's working. Argentine trains ground to a halt and hospitals were left running on fumes this week as austerity measures sparked mass walkouts, even as the country boasted its first budget surplus in 12 years. Well, that's one of the ways you can get a budget surplus, right? Simply don't run your hospitals. Annual inflation has hit 254%. The cost of medicine has soared over 300% year on year. In January, Argentina reported its first monthly budget surplus in 12 years while boosting the country's meager foreign currency reserves from 21 billion to 27 billion. Whew. Economist Salvador Vitelli from the Romano Group said the unusual fiscal result was explained by a 40% drop in spending due to cuts in pensions, subsidies, and salaries. I bet you the conservative media outlets glazing Milei for his budget surplus don't want to mention cuts in pensions as a part of that. Recent opinion polls show Milei's support is starting to wane, with slightly less than 50% having a positive opinion of the president. However, for the first time in a long time, a majority of those surveyed said they expect to see the economic situation improve over the next 2 years. Well, I guess we'll see.